And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining me on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Brandon Steiner. Brandon is a legend here in New York and elsewhere, but he's written a couple of books. The first book was The Business Playbook from 2003. His second book was You Gotta Have Balls, How a Kid from Brooklyn Started from Scratch, Bought Yankee Stadium, and Created a Sports Empire. He was the founder of Steiner Sports. He grew up on the wrong side of the tracks in Brooklyn. And so as a kid from Queens, I can dig that. He was a manager at the Hard Rock Cafe in New York, which if you don't know what that was the place to see and be seen back in the day. He's now the founder of the Steiner Agency and Collectible Exchange. But one of the cool things about Brandon is this nonstop use of somewhere between thought leadership and PR to drive his business. And the last thing I'll put from his interesting bio, he claims, and I'm a little doubtful of this, that he created the everything bagel. So come on, Brandon. You created the everything bagel?
Oh boy, that's where we're going to get started. But it is thoughtful, and it does lead to quite a bit, which is really the moral of the story is that everything happens probably for a reason. It leads to something. So the whole bagel thing is so crazy. When I was a kid, I had a paper route. In order to get more people to get my paper route, I delivered them milk and bagels. And back in 1971 now, remember, there were not a lot of
Grubhub. Pre-Grubhub.
And it was just it's crazy. So what I would do is I'd promise people I'd bring them hot bagels on Sunday. I'd bring them milk during the week. And so I got all the older people in the neighborhood to get the paper from me and tip me. So I was delivering more bagels. You couldn't believe it. So one morning I came in to pick up my bagels and everything. The guy says, you're unbelievable. Every morning you're here. You're reliable. Would you like to bake bagels? I could teach you how to make them and bake them. And we started 4 in the morning because they were making the bagels for the routes for all the grocery stores.
Right.
So I said, of course I'll do that. Well, within like 3 months, I remember I was 12 years old. And I'm waking up at 4 in the morning and then delivering my papers. He gave me a raise to $1.50 an hour when I was the night baker. And the night baker was much more easier baking. We were baking thousands of bagels an hour in the morning. And at night, I was just baking as needed for special orders and stuff like that. And I was sold all the seasonings and everything, trying every combination of every seasoning, bagel twists, bagel braids, everything. And one day I was just, all the seeds that got mixed all together from all the different things I tried, and I just threw it onto the bagel, and there was the everything bagel.
And there you go. And I thank you too frequently as a fan of the everything bagel. So now back to our regularly scheduled broadcast. You've been early to this game. So you've built a major empire. You actually sort of probably created the industry of sports memorabilia as we know it today, and are now with Steiner Agency moving that to more of a digital platform. But you've always been out there as a speaker, as an author, as an advisor, as a consultant. So sort of talk about how that's helped you grow and drive your business and awareness to the brand and all that, because I think you've done an amazing job.
Well, what's amazing is, and this is why I never really understand a lot of CEOs and leadership people that are leading, why they tend to not want to speak and why they tend to not love to get in front of audiences or write down their thoughts or communicate them, because I think they're not only helpful for your own staff to understand where you're coming from, but it's motivating, inspiring to yourself. It really keeps me moving, because I know if I'm throwing some of the things out to my customers and I'm throwing those things out to my staff, then I've got to be religious about doing those things myself. So, the more I talk about customer service, I got more customers coming to me, you wrote in your book. So, and especially now, I built Steiner Sports. It was a great company, 32 years. Now I started Collectible Exchange. When things happened, not quite the way I wanted them to, but I was excited to start something new. I reverted back to some of my leadership, and I'm saying, wait a minute, if I've told all these people when they're on the ground, now they're looking at me a little bit where I've got to start over. I've got to reset, which is what I've told so many people to do over the years. And I think it's so important that you sample. You have to, when you're out there PRing, using thought leadership, using motivation, you got to walk the walk and talk the talk too. So here I am, a little bit lost without my brand. I lost my name in the transition.
Sure.
And here I am getting something started from the beginning, which I think every company is always going through phases of going and starting things from the beginning. You're always asking your employees to dig a little deeper and start from the beginning to get something new to grow. And I think you've got to set an example as a leader. And I've tried to do that through this last year in getting my 2 new companies set up. And
Mm-hmm.
also just transforming, you're asking people always to change. And then when you have an opportunity to change and people are looking at you, you got to then walk the walk. So I've gone through a lot of changes. And, honestly, I mean, thank God for my speaking and my blogs and everything, because it's been a very, very big motivational force internally as I've gone back and started reading my own stuff.
So yeah, well, I love that you're reading your own stuff, but let's split that. So you've been prolific's probably an understatement on the blogging side. You've been blogging and blogging and blogging for a long time.
Yeah.
So go back to when you started. Like, why did you start it? And there's an intrinsic piece, right? So you're learning in order to put something out there, but there's also a benefit. So sort of tie those two together, if you would.
Well, in my business, there was a guy named Mark McCormick. He was incredibly great thought leader in the sports business. He started IMG, and he really doesn't get the credit he deserves for what he did. And I saw that he had a newsletter back in the day, and I would live and die by that newsletter. Everything I didn't learn in Harvard Business School. And so, I'm half illiterate. I can't really write, and I can barely read. I've always had a problem, learning disability. So it's very ironic, that I've been blogging for about 7 or 8 years now with thousands of posts. But what I found is that it got harder and harder to communicate, even with my own employees and customers. As my employee base grew, as my name grew, how am I going to communicate with all these people? I didn't want to go into a silo. So I would storytell on a regular basis, and that's how I create this indirect relationship with my customer. And I thought it was probably the most beneficial thing in not only building the Steiner brand at the time, and now building my collectible exchange brand, but building my own brand. Because I see people on the street and they walk up to me and actually start talking to me like they know me because they've been reading my blog. Now I think the real truth of the matter,
that piece of they feel like they know you. When if someone reads your blog, whatever, on a weekly basis for a year or two, they get a sense of your voice, they get a sense of your style. They can sort of maybe paint a picture in their own mind of what this guy's like and what he's about. So when they see you walking down the street or a Yankee game or something, they feel like you're an old pal. And I think that spills over into the customer relationship, into trust, into, Brandon wouldn't sell me something that's crap. Brandon wouldn't deceive me. But, there's a set of your values come out in what you write. Your essence comes out.
But you have to be transparent. And particularly in my last book, which half my family's not talking to me because I was so brutally honest. I think the brilliance really just comes with the honesty and the transparency, which isn't always beautiful and pretty. And this is where a lot of leaders think that they can't show who they really are. For me, when I speak, one of the big benefits I have is people will come up to me, and I think I do a really good job speaking, but the big takeaway always is like, you're a real person, because I'm in the trenches and I'm really explaining the frustrations, the failures. In my last book, what really motivated me about the last book, Living on Purpose, was I wanted to really communicate that everything wasn't all rosy and I was hanging out with all these big time athletes in a dugout. But there were some shit storms. There was some bad days and some failures. And I wanted to communicate the bounce back on that and how you deal with it.
And I think that by the time a lot of leaders are known, they've got their book out, they're speaking, whatever, the public persona is this shiny, polished, managed thing. Like, oh, look at Brandon. He's hanging with Mariano Rivera and Joe Torre and blah, blah, blah. And then you read the book and you read the whole story and it's like, wait a minute, this kid started on the wrong side of the track with 2.5 strikes against him. And, geez, and it makes you more relatable as opposed to admirable, right? So I can admire, wow, it's pretty cool. I'd love to be hanging with all the sports guys and blah, 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 blah. And that is true. That's part of your persona. But once you sort of open the kimono, I think more people are attracted to that because everybody's got their warts, everybody's got their baggage.
Exactly. We're all better than our worst mistake. And I think owning up was very healthy for me as a leader, even with my own staff, but certainly with my customers, is owning up to the mistakes. I answer a lot, and I get a lot of shit for this, but I answer a lot of customer responses that complain about stuff. And I'm like, you're absolutely right. We suck. This is just not acceptable. I don't blame you. I've got to make this right for you and maybe do something extra for you. I don't just send somebody a gift card and say, by the way, here's to make up for your problem, which is what a lot of companies do, for example. And, I give a lot of honest examples about my mindset about customer service. I treat every customer that calls you with a problem like it's your mom. Now, people know I have a strong focus on my mom. She was my mentor and a great businesswoman. But I think that the thing that I urge a lot of people when I go and speak, especially to higher level managers, is to get more honesty on the table and show people that you're real. You can still be firm and tough, and people have to understand you're the boss. But when you show both sides, and the way to do that is, because you don't want to get into intimate details, like I had a fight with my wife last night, blah, blah.
Yeah, right, right. There's a
but
line.
Storytelling, because, there is a certain level of distance you do need to keep. But I think, storytelling about issues and lessons you've learned with your kids and parenting, or lessons you've learned with a customer that really was right and turned you around is critical. So, for me, I always enjoy the storytelling, and that's what I've learned to do in my communication. And the blog is what.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts.
Taught me to do that.
Was the blog the launch pad to speaking? Were they unrelated? Did they happen simultaneously? So talk about, in the good old days when speaking was a business pre-COVID, sort of how that happened for you.
The funny thing is I couldn't get 100 people to register for my blog. And I was really frustrated. I was like, geez, nobody's registering. I sent out a memo, and I had about 110 employees that said, if you don't register for my blog in the next 24 hours, I can't guarantee you employment. And that's how I got to the 100.
And you still couldn't get 100, or you got 109 at that point?
100. Yeah, that was
it's funny how that happens.
People started laughing because one of the initial intents of the blog was for my own employees to get a better understanding of where I've been and what I think about what I'm trying to build and grow the company. Sure. So my initial intent was just to do stuff for my staff and to do stuff for my immediate customers, and then it just started growing like weeds. People started sharing it because some of the stories were a little different, and I definitely, my style is very different. I'm blogging. So that was happening simultaneously when I got into the Harvey McKay roundtable. It was a big game changer for me.
Yeah.
I came home and I said to my wife, I want to join this roundtable. And she's like, that's a stupid idea. I don't think you should do that. And I generally don't outvote my wife on those kind of decisions, but I was like, I need new friends. And this group has no sports people. So as a thought leader, I'm like, I got to get around some people that are not playing ball, managing sports. And the McKay Group was like 35 people. There were only 2 sports people in the whole group. I said, this is a group I need to be around.
And for those of you under 50, go Google Harvey McKay, but a total legend in this space. And
a legend for me. And a legend
me as well.
I mean, to get to know Harvey as I did prior to the brainstorming thing, I mean, I read every one of his books, and he's definitely a big part of my, the kind of business person I am. I've stolen. I should be in jail for the amount of information and guidance he's given me that I've stolen and put to use. So when I get in this Harvey McKay group, people are looking at me like, you're crazy. You're completely understating all your stuff. That story you just told, which you're trying to be funny, is an incredible inspirational story. You should tell it. And that's what really led me to, you got to have balls. That, and every time I go into a party, there'd be 5 deep waiting for me to want to know how I started Steiner. Because it is an intriguing business. People really don't understand.
But go back on the Harvey piece for a second. So we're going to parallel the Harvey piece is you've been surrounded by world-renowned athletes in every sport. Now, you're not an athlete per se, right? So it's not like you've got your trophy or your World Series ring. So you're a bit of an outsider in that world, right? In terms of you can't tell about, when you were in the World Series or the Super Bowl or whatever. What was interesting, I think, and I don't know if you ever made the connection, when you went to the Harvey Group, those are really dedicated, committed speakers that are also top of their game. And you dove in there, one, deliberately saying, get me out of the sports place for a minute. I need to sort of get new ideas into my brain. And by the way, I need to be surrounded by the best. Right. So was that an intentional?
100%. I said, I'm 50. And I always tell people, like, I said, I needed to make new friends. And I fired some of my existing friends that I was just bored with. That just the relationships were just not interesting to me. I know it sounds.
When you fire weird, a friend, do they get severance, or how does that work when you fire a friend?
they they just quietly drift off into the sunset. Right. Sometimes I'm when they call you up and say, let's get together Thursday, I'm like, they're like, nah, I'm not good Thursday. How about Friday? Nah. Like, how's never?
Yeah.
It's never good.
Yeah. It's never good. Yeah. I don't call me. I'll call you. Right.
So I tell my kids it's hard to make new friends when you get older. Yeah. And I felt like, something like I needed to make some new friends, particularly outside the sports thing because I've become
Right.
such a sports guy, going almost 100 events a year. So to go and sit with a group of people that really did not understand my world and didn't really care.
I also think it's rare at certain stages of life when you're top of your game to consciously go into something with a beginner's mind and go, geez, everyone else in this room is probably far better at this than me. Holy crap. I'm surrounded by an office full of people that go, yes, boss. Yes, boss. I'm in the press. But I think that takes a lot of courage. I would say balls,
Well, thank
actually.
you. I was excited about it. And, the other thing is there was a little failure looming. I'd written one book and
Right.
I grinded it out.
Yep.
Had no idea what I was doing, which
Yep.
is what most people that do their first book, they just have no idea what they're about to jump into.
Yep.
And, I did sell a lot of books. I think about 30,000 books.
That's
But
big.
the hard way. I went to probably
Right.
60 schools and, really legged it out. And I was frustrated because I really thought I'd start getting speaking engagements, and I just didn't. I mean, I think the highest fee I got in that first book was, I think, $1,000 to speak somewhere. And,
Right.
it's actually not that funny, but, it was kind of funny to my family because I told my family I'm going to be speaking now. And my wife's like, because I remember when I did the second book, I told my wife that I wanted to donate all the money to charity. And she did her usual roll up her eyes. I'm like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So when we started really making a lot of money on the second book, she's like, you just donated $50,000 to that charity. Where'd you get that money from? I said, I told you I'm donating the proceeds from the book. But the thing is that when you sit down and you're with a group of people that have all written multiple books, it's just, you can't, I always tell people, like, how do you know what you don't know? And especially when you get to a higher level, nobody really wants to remind you what you don't know because these people are working for you. So it's so important to get into a group where some people are brutally honest with you. And I can't believe
your jokes got less funny, right, when you left the office. Your jokes are clearly less funny when you're around new people.
Exactly. And, it was incredible for me because I just can't believe how much I didn't know and how much I didn't do in my first book. I mean, blatant, obvious stuff. So when I came out with my second book, and then the last book was almost like, it's like you change your kids' diapers in the morning. It's their first kid. You're like, oh my God, I got to get this right. The second kid's like, you throw them on the table, boom, boom, boom. And then, it's like, you're not even thinking twice about it. And that's how I felt with my third book. It was, I really understood the nature of the business and it started kind of popping for me. Not that I'm jumping into a fourth book, because I'm probably not, but I enjoyed the books that I wrote. I enjoy the feedback I get from the books. It's extremely important.
But you're also competitive and wired to win, right? You're very competitive and you're wired to win.
I'm wired
so if
to
you
win,
put a book out there,
I'm wired to learn. Maybe because I grew up and I didn't think I was that smart, so I always thought I had to work harder to learn. But to me, I was like extremely excited about the learning process from the feedback I got from the books. So when I wrote You Gotta Have Balls, this one comment, I read every Amazon comment, probably a couple hundred on Amazon. And this one guy said, how convenient it is for you, Steiner. Everything worked from one thing to another. You grew up poor, then all of a sudden you're now hanging out with Jeter, and then now you're living the good life. And I was like, something? The guy's right. Like, I probably didn't put in a full transparent stories of all the shit storms I was in. I definitely accentuated the good shit. And I don't know if I put in enough of the real tough stuff throughout the book. And that's what really motivated me to write the Living on Purpose book. Some guy that I never met, don't even know, but really went at me a little bit with one of his comments. And I think, if he felt that way and wrote about it, there's probably a lot of people that think that way, maybe misunderstood the trials and tribulations I went through. And maybe I wasn't being as transparently and fully honest as I should have been. And that's when my speaking took to another level, by the way, too, because I stopped going into talks, talking about all the good stuff. And I really got into a mixture of everything, which people found much more fascinating. When athletes fired me and I didn't do the right thing or I missed on something. And as well as the craziness of being resilient and chasing players down and figuring out a way to do a deal. So it was
and the grit and the struggles and I think sometimes people connect and resonate more when you're able to tell them, listen, you see me with Jeter hanging out, blah, blah, blah. But let me tell you what it took me to get these other 5 deals where I was a madman that chased people down and did things others didn't do.
So
and was determined and gritty. Yeah.
So I just did a virtual talk and, I said, look, rather than, obviously, they want me to fire their people up because they're going through this virus and everybody's all upset. But I started the talk with like, listen, when this virus hit, I just started two new companies 9 months ago. I said, because people say, what's the first thing you did when this virus hit? I said, I was looking at all the different bridges to see which one I was going to jump off of. I wanted to make sure if I was jumping that I'd make sure it would be over and it was done. I mean, I was in really bad shape for about a month when this happened. I mean, I'm not perfect, but when I put my head back up again a month later, it's unbelievable. I said, so I'm going to stop watching the news. I'm going to start focusing on what I want things to be like when this virus is over. And all of a sudden, what happened? Everybody went home, started cleaning out their garages, cleaning out their playrooms, and all of a sudden my psyche quadrupled. So I think, a lot of your success is mental mindset, and sometimes it does start in a dark place, and that's okay. You can start off in a dark place and end up flipping it. You just got to decide you want to do that. And I think that was an honest way to start the conversation, because I'm a pretty optimistic, positive person. And in a virus like this and in adverse situations, I do tend to thrive, by the way, because that's what I grew up in. So all that I know is you're in a dark hole. How do you get out, and how do you go make the most of it? That's how
it's almost you get familiar with that, you get back into the zone. So as we start to wrap up here, Brandon, if somebody's out there in a totally different industry, totally different business, and they're scratching their head going, maybe I should write a book, maybe I should speak, maybe I should blog more, but would it really matter in my business? Because I don't think the playbook in sports memorabilia was get a CEO that's a little nuts that writes and blogs and speaks. It would typically, you'd be sort of riding the wave of the fame of the athletes. So I think that's interesting, and I think there might be parallels in others. But what would you advise someone else that's thinking to make the leap into this thought leadership?
I mean, it always goes back to what's your intent? What do you really want to get out of this, and who is this for? If you don't have those two answers, it's really difficult to move forward. But I think what really is the underlying common denominator is you do have to be great at something. Like we often give advice. I mean, people give me a little more credit than I deserve. But at the end, I am very, very, very good at something. I'm very, very, very good. Maybe one of the best, I think. And that was always my goal, to be the best at something that ever was. So when it comes to talent, procurement, and hiring talent, particularly sports talent, and when it comes to collectibles, I am one of the best that ever was, frankly. But so that gives me the opportunity, the platform at least, to be able to speak, and people say, maybe this guy's on to something. So if you don't have a platform that nucleus that's sturdy, and you haven't really done something that's really, really good, that's what the first thing I really recommend to people is really look at the thing that you're really, really the best at, and really see about the storytelling and see what aspects. And the second thing is sample it, I would say dream big, sample small, fail quick. It's like sample it. So, write some storytelling things about what you're thinking about, what the angle that you're trying to communicate to people are, and sample it. Send it to your family, your friends, and your employees, and see what they think about it, and see if it's helpful. Because the only reason I would write my blog is that it's helpful to people. I don't charge for any of my content, and most of my speaking, everything goes to charity. So when I get up and I speak, I'm like, listen, I'm hoping you guys like what I'm talking about, but I know that the children's charity that I'm donating this money to is going to like it.
Is going to benefit.
Even if you all hate me today, we're buying new beds, we're buying new furniture for this kid's home. So I think, it's really important to understand like what you're trying to do. I always felt like my story was interesting enough to motivate others. And when I stop getting those emails and that feedback, I'll stop writing and stop speaking.
Well, great stuff. So I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for the Everything Bagel. Thank you for breaking apart Yankee Stadium and turning that into an industry. Go Google that story if you haven't. And I appreciate you being here today. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.